If you're a fan of Michael Jackson and you've ever wanted to suplex Martin Bashir, there is a game that lets you do just that. It's called Michael Jackson Wrestling with the Truth, and it came out in 2004 as a demo of a bigger wrestling game, Wrestling Empire. The developer MDickie said in his sort of characteristically grandiose style that shortly after Michael Jackson got embroiled in yet another laughable child abuse case in late 2003, he got weary of the media's predictably risible handling of the situation, that the ability to dissect the media, it seems, is a skill lost on most people, and he felt duty-bound to offer an antidote. He intended it to be a bigger project, but time restrictions and common sense left him with 2 weeks to work with. I've seen people call it lost media, but I did manage to track it down pretty easily. It's unlisted from the developer's website, but you can download the game through an older version of the page on archive.org. In the description I'll leave info on how I managed to get it to run on Windows 11. With all the renewed interest in Jackson around the biopic, I remembered that this game exists, because I actually used to be a fan of MDickie's games as a kid around 2010, before he made the switch to mobile games that he's mostly known for now. He's known for these endearingly janky and chaotic games. They're on various topics, but they're mostly relying on the same core mechanics he developed for the wrestling simulators, which makes for some random and mostly unintentionally funny moments. If you've heard this sound,
my muscles are getting bigger. Oh.
It's from a streamer playing his prison simulator called Hard Time. So I think at the time when I was going through MDickie's catalog, it seemed like a weird idea even for the guy. But honestly, now that I've researched more about the 2005 trial, I can understand better where he was coming from. Just to get my stance on the whole Michael Jackson controversy out of the way, until a couple of weeks ago all I knew about Michael Jackson was what the common knowledge is. I liked a couple of his songs, but I knew he's had some allegations against him and that probably in the best case scenario he was weird towards kids. As the biopic came out, I saw a video by a big TikTok creator that I used to follow talking about evidence, how obvious it was that he was inappropriate to children, criticizing the movie for leaving the stuff out and ridiculing people who defend Jackson, while assuming a moral high ground for being the one who listens to the victims. It seemed reasonable at first, but then I got more into the topic and took some effort to read about the case, how the media covered it and how they still talk about him and some of the more recent allegations. So just to get some basic facts straight, there was one criminal trial against Jackson, the one in 2005 that's fictionalized in the game, where he was found not guilty on all 10 counts. The FBI kept a file on him for 12 years and charged him with nothing. I don't know if there was ever a person whose life was scrutinized more than his was, and they still could not find compelling evidence or one person who would be willing to testify in a way that stands up to scrutiny in court of law. Nonetheless, a number of people who testified under oath in his defense as adults and who hugely benefited from being around him now show up in documentaries to slander the dead man and try to get settlements from his estate, 98% fresh at Rotten Tomatoes. If you want to learn more about the specifics of why Jackson was found not guilty and how the 2005 trial was covered, I recommend this article by Charles Thompson. Once the public paints you guilty of something, if you give a filmmaker editing power, airtime and enough footage to paint you in a bad light, it's extremely difficult to clear your name. That's what the court of law is for, and Jackson was cleared of everything. So that's where I stand on it until proven otherwise, and I think it's a reasonable position to take. Unless you believe that a black man in America had enough power to stop the law enforcement, including FBI, from investigating these things. To me, it smacks of conspiratorial thinking for the kind of people who ridicule his defenders as irrational Michael Jackson stans. After researching him, the way I see Jackson now is as a sensitive, kind, probably autistic man, a visionary in his craft and a perfectionist, with an incredibly difficult upbringing, whose success and goodwill towards others turned against him and to a large extent led to his premature death. Now back to the game. You get to choose from a range of MJs from different eras and fight 5 different opponents. The crazy part is they're made after real people involved in the 2005 case. Apart from Bashir, the disgraced journalist who made the documentary that led to the case being opened, you fight District Attorney Thomas Snedden and journalist Diana Diamond. One way in which this game does cross the line for me is featuring the teenager who was the alleged victim in the case. I see him as a victim of his dysfunctional family who tangled him up in this whole madness, and I don't feel comfortable making light of his story, as opposed to the other villains here. The only generic character in the game is a police officer. Sometimes other characters show up randomly, either to fight you, or if you get lucky, Pharrell, for whatever reason, shows up to help you out. So there is a story mode in the game where you fight them in order and reenact this exaggerated wrestling style drama through little scenes before each fight. There is also MJ Convention mode, which is like a fever dream mode where you get assigned a random character and fight 9 others, so you end up with 5 Michael Jacksons fighting each other. So I think it's an interesting example of a video game being made to take a stand about something very specific. Definitely it was also made partly to capitalize on controversies and sell another game, but regardless, I think it'd be unfair to see it as made purely to be controversial just for its own sake, in a middle school bully humor kind of way. If it was done like a lot of other edgy entertainment of its time, it could have easily made Jackson into a weird laughingstock and a criminal, as a lot of the media did and still do. This Michael Jackson is like a cartoon character, but filtered through the theatrics of American wrestling, where he's a face, the good guy against the evil heels. It's worth pointing out that this game was published before the actual trial. This guy must have published it knowing that he could have ended up being the guy who made a game where you play as a real-life abuser, and he did it anyway. And if you're wondering if it reached Jackson himself, apparently it did, as DxWnd said that a representative of Jackson sent him a letter saying the game was a fabulous gesture. What I see below the crudeness of the gameplay and the cringy speeches of the characters is someone who took 2 weeks out of his life to create this, to make a dozen or so of different models of Michael Jackson, giving them unique dance moves and coming up with a way to retell it as a wrestling drama in which MJ fights these comical but real villains and comes out victorious. It's a product of love. Seeing how DxWnd's conservative politics leak into his games and his general online image, he probably wouldn't agree with me on this, but to me this game feels like a product of a uniquely autistic conviction in your righteousness. One that makes you take a stand on something even if you have no stake in it and it might be in your better interest to shut up. A wrestling-obsessed game developer and a fan of MJ steps in to support him in one way that he knows best, to make him the hero of his game, coming out on top of his enemies in front of a live audience. He's letting you become MJ, who in reality probably wouldn't hurt a fly, and you get to punch a camera out of Bashir's hands, beat him up with it and body slam his way into the truth. If I was making an art exhibition on games and society, this would probably make it in there. A piece of satire or fanfic, a product of righteous anger and a way to channel it, however you call it. It took the realities of a trial surrounded by a media circus as it was unfolding and put it into a virtual circus of wrestling, a kind of a drag show for straight men, and a janky video game that lets you take matters into your own hands, somehow ridiculing and dignifying the whole process at once, having Jackson violently defeat his accusers and whipping out a moonwalk as he does it.